Entry 36. Right now, J-Guile and Whole Horse, in partnership, attack the Joestars. I have yet to receive a report on how it went, so, with genuine pleasure, I will continue from where I left off yesterday. They've been disrupting my plans non-stop recently. However, thanks to that, it has become easier to remember things from 100 years ago, because it has truly been 100 years since I felt such anxiety. As someone whose emotions run high in conflict, I beat them mercilessly. I hadn't had a fight like that since my fist fight with Jonathan 7 years earlier. But your body never forgets techniques learned as a child, no matter how much time passes. Be that as it may, I could not deny my numerical handicap. I planned on beating the first one, and then finishing off the other. Stand battle or not, numbers mean everything in a fight. So you make a 1-on-2 fight into 2 1-on-1 fights. This is a fundamental aspect of street fighting. On the second man, I placed the weapon I was still carrying, with which I had planned to kill Jonathan, the stone mask. I stabbed the first man, who had been cowering away, with another weapon I had, a simple knife, and then I coated the stone mask in his blood. And that was my second slice of bread, wasn't it? The second and the third slices of bread. As I expected, it had a bland taste. To get into details, even using the knife and the stone mask to kill them directly, more directly than my father, I can say it did not feel any more real. Had I not been drunk on that roadside, I doubt I would have overtly committed murder. But while it may have been fueled by the liquor and been an utter fluke, it was good. Had I not committed murder there, I most likely would have placed the stone mask on Jonathan like I originally planned. And when I think what would have happened had I done that, I shiver. Perhaps it would be more correct to say I would shudder. Just thinking that I, Dio, and Jonathan, that our fates could have switched, is quite interesting. The one who became an immortal vampire may have been Jonathan, and then the one who became a Hamon master, in order to exterminate him, may have been me, Dio. Intersecting fates, reversing fates. Of course, while this is fascinating to think about, nothing of the sort actually happened. If it had happened, it would have been unbearable in an entirely unamusing way. But I digress. Now then, the results of the human experiment. Once sprayed with blood, the needles instantly sprung out of the stone mask, and the needles pierced the man's brain. At that moment, the stone mask glowed. It emitted a blindingly bright light. I thought at that moment it was just an illusion, much like how a superb painting or a sculpture can seem like it is emitting light. But I was wrong. Having thought the man dead the moment the needles dug into his brain, I turned my back on him to pick up my hat which had fallen off during the fight. And in that moment, he got up and attacked me with terrific power. With a body that had returned to its youth, with a body that did not feel pain, with an unbelievable strength that crushed my collarbone just by grazing it, he attacked me with the intent to kill. No, that's not right. He was not trying to kill me. He was trying to eat me. If the sun had risen just a few seconds later, I would likely have become the first slice of bread to that vampire I had accidentally created. Being an ordinary human at the time, with obviously no way of using Hamon techniques, I had no means of resistance against a vampire, a being which had surpassed humanity. The risen sun turned the man's body to ash, to dust, and he disappeared. And so I learned that the weakness of that mighty life form was the sun. It had all been a coincidence. There was no intention or plan. My learning of the stone mask's secret and my learning of a vampire's weakness was all pure coincidence. One could call it nothing but the result of some mistakes. But when that many coincidences pile up, it becomes design. When that many failures pile up, it becomes something like a success. That is what I believe. Entry 37. Even after all that, I still had no intention of donning the stone mask myself. It did, of course, allow one to obtain great power and an immortal body, but the sacrifices were too great. By referencing Jonathan's research notebooks, it most probably did something like this. The stone mask brings out the latent potential of the human brain. The potential of the brain. The human brain is an organ which still holds many mysteries. The idea that the stone mask's needles had the function of awakening a sleeping ability which we humans never knew of did not take long to deduce. Awakening the brain, pushing the brain, that is what the stone mask was made to do. But even knowing that, there were still many unknowns. I had still only performed a single experiment on humans, so I never even thought of using that mysterious mask on myself. However, I was driven into a situation where I had no other choice. After my experiment had ended, after my drunken wandering had ended, one could say, what awaited me at the Joestar residence was Jonathan Joestar, having returned safely from Ogre Street. Safely for him, not for me. He had brought with him the Chinaman that had sold me the poison, as well as a friend he seemed to have made on Ogre Street. I was utterly cornered. Checkmated, if you will. But I had known this would be the outcome. Knowing the sort of man Jonathan Joestar was, I had known much earlier that I was cornered. Nevertheless, I did not care for cowardice. The thought of not returning to the mansion and fleeing never occurred to me. I would never run from a man like him. In order to fight Jonathan, I returned to the Joestar mansion, a place that now held only death for me. I obtained an antidote. In other words, I've gotten proof, Dio. I do this with a heavy heart. Although I cannot say we ever really got along, you and I grew up like brothers. But now I'm forced to hand you over to the police. Jonathan said something along those lines. He really did seem reluctant, or rather sad, when he saw me. It's too bad, Dio. It really is. You may not understand, but that is how I truly feel, Dio. How? How can I express this? To have these apparently kind words spoken to me from the man I intended to square off against. I wonder if Jonathan could imagine how much it hurt me, how much it wounded me. Those sad eyes, those compassionate eyes, just how he bruised me, I doubt Jonathan could ever know. But I did not become enraged. I endured Jonathan's insult, and to Jonathan I said, Entry 38. I have received an unexpected report. That is why my last entry ended so abruptly. If this notebook is to be something like a memorandum or a commonplace novel, then there is little meaning in fussing over connections and jumps, but all the same, it feels unpleasant to break stride. Still, it was necessary. Something has happened about which I must write first, something displeasing. I have received word that the team of J. Guile and Whole Horse, that very rare partnership of two stand users, was beaten by the Joestars. And it happened several days ago, it seems. There is a reason that this information only just reached me. An unavoidable, permissible excuse, to which I, Dio, can only say, in that case, it cannot be helped. That is because the person who was supposed to report the information to me, Enya the hag, went out of her senses the moment she heard it. Defeat. Whole Horse fled, being, apparently, still able to make such a choice. Enya's son, J. Guile, was impaled by Jean-Pierre Polnareff's silver chariot. He has claimed his revenge, but her son was killed. So even that witch can be sad. Even that witch can be a mother. Even though she is not a holy woman, she could still be a mother. Anyhow, another subordinate that couldn't help but overhear her screams of anguish later gave me a report of the situation. Thankfully, despite the loss, the partnership did claim one victory. The report said that he, whom one may call the crux of the Joestar group, the fortune teller Avdol, was eliminated. Considering that only J. Guile died and Whole Horse survived, then both sides suffered one loss. Therefore, I believe that we are even. Lives, souls, are things that can be added and subtracted, and they certainly can't be divided, but regarding our side's numbers, I believe I could actually call this something of a victory. Something of a victory. Yes, something of a victory. I want to call it that. But now, Enya the Hag, whom one may call the crux of my organization, has lost her senses. I therefore cannot say the result was balanced between the two sides. We've suffered major damage. Catastrophic damage. In all honesty, it is damage I do not anticipate we can recover from. Right now, the Empress is using her stand ability to pursue the Joestar group, but I wonder about the outcome. Just how functional can an organization be once the chain of command is lost? It seems the time has come. It seems I must make a serious effort. It is I, after all, that has the fated connection with the Joestar family, and it seems that connection must be severed directly. I must formulate a strategy like I did 100 years ago, like I had to. A plan to take everything from the Joestar household, but I must first do something about Enya, about that mother who has lost her child, lost her mind. Entry 39. There are a great many things I should write, so much that I'm unsure where I should begin. This notebook is ultimately a record of the way to attain heaven. In this manner, it is different from the research notebook Jonathan kept regarding the stone mask. That's why there really isn't a need to write a detailed description of each and every little thing regarding the stone mask, and I feel that even if I write in detail about my mental states from 100 years ago, it will only serve to put me in a bad mood. And now my current situation is starting to get worse as well. Perhaps I should temporarily suspend my search for the way to heaven. Maybe I should devote my attention to my battle with the Joestar family. Perhaps I should. Objectively and rationally, that is the correct choice. Attaining heaven is not something I can enact in the next few days at any rate. It is a long-term plan with no end in sight. Therefore, the correct thing to do is to put it off for now. But that rationality is displeasing to me. Saying it and writing it makes me sick. The correctness is fundamentally irritating. For the sake of those people, Jonathan's grandson and his grandson, and the rest of their group, I must depart from my original plan. To act prudent and delay heaven of my own volition isn't something that should be happening, and should I admit that, Dio is no longer Dio. Therefore, I will persist in working towards my goal. Now, without any more delay, I will continue from where I left off. I was cornered by Jonathan. I was pitied by Jonathan, but I endured that humiliation and I decided to exploit it. I pretended to act gracious, and in the opportunity that created, I tried to stab and kill him with a knife. I could no longer think about consequences. It was time to kill Jonathan. At that point, that was all I could think about, but Jonathan was meticulously prepared. He had already brought a squad of police officers into the mansion. Actually, I doubt that was Jonathan's idea. Undoubtedly, that was the idea of the friend he brought with him from Ogre Street. Speedwagon. That person said this to me, while I, Dio, continued my performance to try to draw out even more sympathy from Jonathan. He kicked a candlestick at me and said this. "This guy stinks! He reeks of a stench that's worse than vomit. I've never met anyone so evil. His circumstances made him evil? I don't think so. This guy was born evil. Mr. Joestar, you should just hurry and hand him over to the police." Such correct words. It may have been a different place, but he was raised in the bottom rung of society as well. He saw through me, Dio, perfectly. Be that as it may, I did not think we could understand each other. I could not imagine us ever walking side by side. And perhaps I was indeed born evil. I'm sure I was. Even I think so. At the very least, as far back as I can remember, I do not know a time when I was pure, when I was a good person, or a time when I was innocent. I always made fun of my saintly mother, and in my life up to that point I had not really amassed any good deeds. If anything, in the 7 years I spent at the Joestar residence, when I donned the mask of being a good student, I acted like a fairly good boy, but that was all done in order to usurp the Joestar family fortune. So I don't suppose one could call any of that a good deed. It was insincere, which may be even worse than being directly, purely evil. So, Speedwagon was correct. I was born evil. His words rang utterly true, but in every other point that person was wrong. He was off the mark. Even if I was born evil, even if mine is a cursed soul, he could not say the environment I was born in and grew up in were not awful. I am evil, and my circumstances were bad. There is no contradiction. It is consistent. After that, I put on the stone mask. I would cease to be human, but, surprisingly, perhaps the thing that spurred me to do it was that man, Speedwagon. When I think about it that way, it is a bit odd. Fate is something that seems tightly fixed, but actually, with just little mistakes, it can be easily changed. Entry 40. I pierced Enya the hag with a flesh bud. That was the only way for me to return her to sanity, or that was what I thought. In the end, her sanity did not return. She only got a bit better. I also received news that Empress and Wheel of Fortune have lost to the Joestars, and now Enya has finally gone to eliminate them herself. Without discussing or reporting it to me at all, I wonder what the outcome will be. Enya the hag's justice is a stand ability which allows her to simultaneously manipulate a large number of corpses. Therefore, in a way, it rivals the stone mask. If one were to fight it head on, I don't think there is any stand that could beat it. And even if they don't fight head on, I doubt the result would change. That old woman's stand can overcome the numerical disadvantage of being one versus many. The only thing I am worried about, as there was no way around it, is that I had to use a flesh bud. Her stand power will weaken as a result, and that is something to be concerned about. I don't much feel like writing in my notebook today. I will continue this tomorrow.